Welcome back to another episode of CRE, The Unspoken Truth. Today we are talking about thinking high level and diving into the details, two totally different skill sets. And I really want to start broad and then we'll work our way a little more narrow. But let's just start broad with the two different skill sets. They're totally different. And I guess my first question is, how do you, in my perspective, you do a good job of doing both, right? You will get into the weeds. You are very detail oriented, but you're also a strategic thinker. And so how do you maybe split your time or split your brain, your thought process into the two areas of business, and how do you manage and do well at both?
Well, it's really hard to do both. Most people have a big visionary personality or they have a detailed personality. So I would say, and this is for primarily commercial real estate brokers that we're talking to. So let me address that first. The first 20 years of my business, I was pretty much a solo broker with an assistant and a runner. And then over the last 20 years, in the last 20 years, I've been building a team, and that team has forced me to kind of change how I do my business. So if I'm talking to the brokers that we're selling to, the individual brokers and small shops, we end up having to do both. And so that's a skill set that you can learn. And so I want to talk about, as we talk about just the big picture, which would be, and I would say you've read my book, The Fantastic Life Revisited and The Fantastic Life, but The Fantastic Life Revisited, rule number 2 is get clarity. And so clarity in your ROC goals, whatever those are as a broker. I want to do 50 deals this year. I want to develop a niche within the office market segment. I want to sell 10 buildings. Getting clarity is like the most important thing for big picture visionary thinking. When you say visionary, you think it's going to be something completely out of the blue, but it's really, what do you want out of your life? And so when I wrote The Fantastic Life, it's like, hey, I want to be the top producer at Lean Associates. And so that requires a whole lot of thinking otherwise. And you and I talk about this a lot. You know where I'm headed. We're going to go right to gravel. If you have clarity on your rocks, if you understand exactly what those are, then we spend a shit ton of time on gravel.
So on the clarity, is there anything that you found that helps you get clarity, or helps you, think more in that realm, and any tools you've used that have helped you?
Yeah, I think, well, I created my own tool. We have this tool within our own organization, and we share it now, OBC, which is IOBC. Every conversation stands for objective-based conversations, but those conversations can be external with someone like you, or in front of a group where I'm speaking to. Last week we were at the Lee Summit. I was speaking to 100 people, or they can be internal to myself, and these conversations about what is important to me. And so when I do that, I break that down. Like if I want to be the #1 producing broker at Lean Associates for the year, what does that mean? And I OBC that. It means I have to do 150 transactions, and that means their team has to do X dollars in business. It means we have to have X dollars of listings. We have to get X number of tenant representations. We have to close these kind of deals. That's all the gravel piece of it. But the OBC, the clarity that comes from my OBC, is what allows me to really focus on what's important and what's not important. And I think if you don't have clarity, you can't really focus and zero in.
And then do you write these down, right? As you're kind of thinking through it, do you write it down and kind of workshop it?
There's a thing. If it's not written, it's an idea that goes away. So everything I do, I write. And you've seen my goals. What's your line? You tell everybody about my goals. Don't follow my dad.
Don't show them.
Don't show them your goals, Dad. Because they're 86, 11.5 by 17 typed pages of goals, because they are a ton of rocks with a ton of gravel piled on that takes me to the sand. And that's the kind of this is the first time we're probably going to talk about it, but my next book is called Rocks, Gravel, Sand, and it's 268 pages, all about gravel, all about the messy middle. And so I've been spending the last 5 years kind of writing this manuscript of how you do this. And so I've spent a ton of time, and you and I spend a ton of time on the company. How do we break this rock goal down? And so getting clarity is your first thing, and clarity comes to me through OBC, and it comes to me over a period of time. So I'll OBC it, then I'll look at it, then I'll refine it, then I'll change it, then I'll look at it. So that's why I do a lot of goal setting, because goals they don't come out right away. Like, I want to be successful. That doesn't ring.
Yeah. And you look at this from a life perspective, right? Like you just wholesome view of this high level thinking. Are there specific examples of someone who's, just starting their career, who doesn't have the platform necessarily to think, visionary, high level strategic thinking in their job, but can still work on getting better in that area? Like, is there anything you would tell that person?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I would say is there were years, decades, where we were surviving, right? When you start out as a broker, and I say this to all of our young folks that I'm mentoring and that we coach and that are in our runner program and our graduate apprentice program, brokerage is a 10-year decision. Because the first 3 years you're either a runner or you're just learning the business. The next 3, and your pals, everybody's out there, they have jobs, they're making money, you're getting your butt kicked and you're not making any money. So for 3 years you're losing ground. And then in the second 4 through 6 or 7, you're kind of catching up to where they were. They've moved on, they've got a promotion. You're now finally a broker on your own, chasing business. And then 7 through 10 is where you should shoot by them. That's where you should be making tons of money. So at the 10th year mark, you're like, I'm really happy that I decided to be a broker. But before that, 9 years and 350 days early, into it, you're like, man, this sucks. And then all of a sudden you're like, then you're like, whoa, I've woken up and I've been successful. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, I think, we talk about this, 87% of all brokers fail within the first 5 years. So you get to the top 13% just by surviving the first 5 years. And so the first 5 years in my business, I was surviving. I had, I got in business in 1984. Your mom and I got married in 1989. So 5 years into the business, I didn't have any kids. 1990, we had our first kid. And so now it's like, oh boy, now we're doubling the kids. Then we had our other kids. And so it just keeps changing. But the survival is something that you can think about too. And so when I thought about Survivor, I said all to myself is like, okay, I'm going to survive, but how am I going to survive with a long-term perspective? And so I always added that. And survival to me was, I'm not going to burn any bridges over a commission, even when I didn't have any money. And you want to push really hard. I tell this story all the time. I had this incredible client. His name was Gary Birnbaum, and he was one of the big law firms in town. Mariscal Weeks McIntyre was a top 10 size law firm. And it was really one of the first law firms that I had a chance at representing in the early days, in the late 80s. And I made a pitch for it. And Gary was super nice. He listened to me. I was a young broker. And he, I pitched, and he called me and he said, Craig, I love you, but I'm not going to use you. And it was heartbreaking to me. And I said to him, I said, Gary, I love you, and I appreciate that you gave me the opportunity, and I'm going to earn the business over the next 10 years, because he did a 10-year lease. 10 years later, I'm now in the business, 15 years. I got Gary's business. I did the renewal. I moved him a third time, and they were a big firm. I mean, I did 3 big transactions with them over the next 30 years. And he not only gave me business, but he referred business to me. He talked to me. He was like a mentor to me every time I met with him. And so I learned my lesson really quickly. It took a long time, but that's the kind of relationships I want. And unfortunately, Gary's passed, but he was just a phenomenal client for me. And I learned that's how you do business. Survive with a long-term perspective.
Yeah, the long-term perspective is key. It's hard, but it's also important. So we've talked to 400 or 500 brokers this year, just with DealView and our company, obviously. And one of the things that I've been a little surprised at is a lot of the brokers we talk to are 100% focused on just doing deals, and I guess it's kind of, maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Of course, that's, what they get paid to do. That's the most important thing. They should always be focused on deals and clients. But, at the end of the day, brokers are 1099s and really running their own business. And so, like I said, I've been a little surprised that they don't have that business owner mentality. And I'd be curious to hear your take on, most brokers and how they think about their business versus just, doing deals and getting the next commission and on to the next kind of.
I think, the nugget from the invention of DealView was the fact that we were tracking a whole bunch of information on Excel. That was the nugget that came out. And I assumed that everybody else was doing the same. Pen and paper, Excel. Every now and then you'd run into somebody that actually had paid money to build out a Salesforce application. But the idea was, hey, this is information that every one of them has, and every one of them is tracking in some sort of way. But what we found out was they were tracking it in a survival way and not in a long-term way. And so this survival was keeping their deals so they could track it, they could see it, they were updating their pen and paper or their Excel spreadsheet, but they weren't pulling out the data. And so we built this thinking, oh, everybody would want to see it. Now we've had to learn how to show them, you already have this data. Number one, it's super easy to put in there. You're already tracking it. That's easy. We're tracking it now. You're doing it, but in Excel. But number two, we can now pull out this data with no additional time on your side and give you insights to your own business that you don't even know about. And what's been amazing to me, not only for everybody that we've signed up, and I think we're now in 25 or 30 states, but what's been amazing is the amount of data that my own team's gotten. And we were the kings of this. We were spending hundreds of hours analyzing our data because it was valuable. But now with the slice and dice and the filters the way we have them, we are gaining more insights now than we ever have. So the value to our team has gone up and the value to our clients, and they're starting to see this on a long-term basis. So Survive, of course, that's what DealView does at its core. But then long-term perspective gives you the ability to kind of look at that. And it's, it's $50 a month. So for $300 a year, you're getting so much more than you ever thought you would get out of your data that you already have.
Yeah. I've been, pleasantly surprised. We've had a couple of young brokers, see the value in the long term, right? They have that long-term perspective on their business. And they look at this as an investment in their business and saying, hey, I'm only doing a handful of deals, right now, but my plan is, and I'm committed to doing more over the years. And I want to have the data tracked and visualized the way that DealView does it, as I continue to grow. So,
you don't know when you're surviving, surviving means that we're just trying to, have enough water and food and clothing to kind of keep us warm and get us through the night. So survival is, and as we go through these cycles, survival means something different to everybody, but it's really stressful on brokers. And so what we say, for the price of a lunch, we can take a lot of that stress out of your life. It's like, I remember this very distinctly. I'd be number one in the company on December 31, and we have this annual bonus party. We started Lee & Associates in 1991, so 32 years ago now, 33 years, and we'd have this on the first Thursday after, so say January 3rd or 4th, we'd have this bonus party. I'd get this big check, and everybody would say, "What a great year you had." And I remember the crashing the next day, going, "How am I going to do this again? How am I going to start this?" So this is 1993 on, 91 and 92. I wasn't the number one guy, but then 93 on, it was pretty regular that I was being the number one guy. And I remember just always coming home with this euphoric check and so excited, and then the next morning depressed. And so one of the reasons I started tracking all this data was like, okay, how many deals do we have in our pipeline? How many deals? Because I would just wake up and go, because I had it on Excel, it doesn't resonate. Now with DealView, it's like, hey, we still have 100 deals in our pipeline for this year. we still have business going on. We still have stuff that we can close. So it eases my burden. And for most people, brokers never remember the deals they did. Like, I can't tell you, we did 152 leases last year. I cannot tell you how many 10 of those deals. Because we're looking forward. You can't, brokerages, you're not resting on your laurels ever. You're into the next deal. Close the deal. We put a deal in escrow today. I've been working on it for literally 2 years. Put it in escrow. I am not thinking about that closing right now. I'm thinking about the next deal. And that's how brokers live. And so this gives them a little bit of time to sit back and maybe feel good about themselves, feel good about their pipeline. And if it's not good, to kick themselves in the butt. We had one guy from Colliers, as you know, he signed up. He said, I only have 3 deals right now. And this is a top producer, but it kicked him in the butt going, start putting more deals in. And he's putting more deals in.
So we talked a little bit about high level thinking and things you can do, clarity helping you get that idea of what you want, where you're headed. When you get down to like the detail level, like day to day, the weeds, are there any tools you found or any activities or things that you've picked up along the years that help you get better at, being really detail oriented or like, day to day, focused on what you need to get done?
Yeah, I think this is where there's we talk a lot about ceilings of complexity, and the brokers that are surviving, the brokers that survive, we have this quote, right? The quote that you like all the time, which is brokers have a plan on Sunday night till they get punched in the face Monday morning, and then they're reactive, not proactive. So the idea of spending all the time on the clarity and on the gravel is because when you have a plan, you can execute the plan. So one of the things that I always say is, like, if you're having to think Monday morning what your next 20 calls are going to be, if you're having to think what your top deals are, if you're having to think whose leases are expiring in the next 6 to 12 months, then you haven't done your work. So when I come into the office on Monday morning, this is Monday afternoon, when I come in, I knew exactly the 20 calls I needed to make. I knew exactly the deals I had to work on. I knew exactly, and we give that's what DealView dashboard does. So we provide that on a basis. Before we had that, I would write that down on a piece of paper every single time. And so I knew going in, I had this day timer, and I had someone tell me the other day, I remember Craig in the 80s, he would carry around this Franklin day timers, this massive thing. And they're like, what? Everybody else had these little calendar deals, and I had this big thing. And I was like, why are you carrying this around? I'm like, these are the calls I have to make. Here's literally every deal I'm working on and everybody's phone number and when I'm calling. And I would literally get in there. I'd write it out on Sunday. I'd write them all out, and then I just start knocking them off, calling them. And I was like, and so I just realized this idea of, if you're having to think, and Tom Blyue just said it the other day, if you are trying to think about what your activity is for the next 15 minutes, then you have not done the gravel. He didn't say gravel, but I use gravel. He didn't do the gravel work to get there.
Yeah. Two kind of stories come to mind for me. We have all of our interns and even, new employees that we bring on do a 30-day email. You started that, you taught it to me. I did it at my last company, and then we've continued to do it here at CRE OneSource. But essentially, to summarize their day, they write in, what did I do today? What did I learn today? What questions do I have? And the fourth question, the last question is, what are my top priorities for tomorrow? And it gets these, young people, interns, new hires thinking, these 3 things are my most important things for tomorrow, so that, 8 a.m. comes the next morning, they're ready to go. And it works really well. I do it for myself every night. I sit there and say, okay, these are 2 or 3 things I have to get done tomorrow. And it allows me to just be action oriented in the morning. And, one other little story that comes to mind is on DealView, right? Onboarding, a bunch of brokers and customers onto it. We talk about, how are you going to review your deals? How frequently, how are you doing it today? And, the Friday morning or Friday afternoon always comes up. That's usually the time that brokers have a little quieter time. They usually spend that, time, 15, 20 minutes, each Friday, recapping their week, organizing it all, making sure everything's kind of off their plate. and then preparing for the next week. And, Mondays, it doesn't work,
This is called the unspoken truth. I know that brokers take Friday to do that. I cold called every Friday afternoon. Why? Because my competitors were either playing golf or they were reviewing their deals. And I did my deals on Sunday when they were, working in their families. I was up early Sunday morning getting that organized. So the idea is you have to have a system to do that. Whether it's a system Friday afternoon or my system, which, we're always looking, in watching Last Dance with Michael Jordan, I just thought it was so fascinating how every single one, that hot dog vendor in the stand looked at me wrong, so I'm going to go out and score 40 tonight. And that's what I did every time. It's like, Mom, my competitors are, I'm one of my top competitors. For the longest time, the two of the three partners were golfers, really good golfers, and I'm not a golfer. So I'm like, great. When they're golfing, I'm cold calling because I'm going to win. They might get one guy on the golf course to get them business, but I'm going to go win more business because I'm cold calling and I'm doing more work and I'm meeting with people Friday afternoons. And so you have to turn all of these into kind of how do we get more successful? How do we get away from just surviving?
Yeah. No, it's wonderful. I did have one broker who said Sundays. He said it's Sundays his day to review his deals. And so most of them lean towards Friday afternoon or something, but there are some out there that are doing it on Sundays on the weekends.
I found on Fridays I could do my list and I could kind of transfer my deals to the next week. But what I couldn't do was really think about my business because I was like, I got to get home. It's Friday afternoon. So I was like, I'd rather take myself out of that, the time pressures of Friday afternoons, because there's always something going on. Something was going on. And I'd kind of half-ass do the list. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do this when I'm fresh and I'm clean. So I would either be, Saturday or Sunday morning. And it would be one of the first things I did. And it was transfer. And over time, it got really cumbersome. One of the reasons why we did DealView is like, it's tracking my deals a lot easier for me now that we don't have to manually transfer those every week.
Right. Well, this has been wonderful. So any last thoughts on high level thinking, detailed thinking, how it relates to brokerage, and obviously DealView applies to it as well?
Yeah, I think, obviously DealView is a tool and we all need a tool. If you don't have good systems, you need a tool. And so DealView is a tool for $50 a month. It's a tool that works great. But the idea is don't just survive. How do I survive and thrive, which is thrive to me is long-term. So if you're doing a whole bunch of transactions and you want a little bit more organization, DealView is a great tool for you. And my idea is to just make sure you put the information in there so that you can actually pull out all the data that you already have. This kind of stuff you've had all your career. I knew intrinsically that we were getting, I knew that we had lost some listings. But looking at how the activity moves and where our business is coming from and how many deals we lost versus how many, all of that is because we're now tracking on DealView. But more importantly, it's just a tool for us to kind of really get our arms around the business and spend some time to make sure that we have this big picture view of where we're headed and that we're not just deal monkeys out there, that we are actually thinking about our business as a businessman or woman should, and actually executing a plan, which is hard.
Yeah, it gives the clarity, right? To bring it back full circle to how we started, the data and all of that brings the clarity needed to think high level, right? And allow you to continue to move your business down the road. So awesome. Thank you so much. And until next time.
See you soon.